You have to love what you do. And if you don't, go figure out something else. You have to like, at a minimum, like who you do it with, preferably love who you do it with. And that's the fitting in culture. You have to feel valued and you have to be fairly compensated. And when you get all those things, that's success. Like, you should be happy.
This is Aon at the Top, where we explore the journeys of today's most influential C-suite and board leaders. I'm Nicole Ward, Senior Vice President at Aon. And each episode, we go inside the pivotal decisions, defining moments, and leadership lessons that shaped their paths to the top. Greg Henry, so glad that you are here today in studio to have this conversation. Welcome.
Thank you, Nicole. I really appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Greg Henry is the Chief Financial Officer at 1Password, one of the fastest growing players in the cybersecurity and identity management space. Greg is a seasoned finance leader with a track record of scaling world-class tech companies. At Couchbase, he steered the company through its IPO, raised over $400 million in capital, and helped drive nearly 10x ARR growth while leading a major shift to a cloud-as-a-service model. Before that, he guided global finance operations at ServiceNow, one of the great enterprise software success stories. Now at 1Password, Greg is charting the next chapter of growth, helping the company scale securely while balancing innovation, governance, and sustainable value creation. He also held senior leadership roles at GE, Ernst & Young, and was named one of the top 25 data CFOs in 2025. Outside of work, Greg enjoys skiing, music, wine, and time with his wife and 3 children. Again, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Nicole. I really appreciate you having me. And I just was realizing as I was coming in today that we've known each other for 10 years, and it's going to be fun to sit down and have a conversation today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, good. Well, let's start maybe before we get to all of the boardrooms and IPOs and all the fancy stuff you've done. Maybe you could share a little bit more on the origin story side, as in maybe what your upbringing was like, maybe any early influences that you had that have helped shape your sort of drive for leadership.
Yeah. So I'm actually now residing in the Bay Area, but originally grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and very proud of it. And I had a very wonderful upbringing, lived in this wonderful community. My mother stayed home and took care of me and my 2 other brothers. My father was a doctor, so he was gone quite often. And so my mother was the main one in the early years, really kind of bringing us up. And, I get my work ethic from my father, but my mother really taught me how to drive and focus. And I remember even going back way, way long time ago when I was learning how to play tennis, and she'd be out there being like, you can't let the ball hit the second time. Like, you got to run for it. You got to hustle. And so I learned some of that from her, but I had a wonderful upbringing with wonderful brothers. And I'm very fortunate, and I'm trying to obviously pass it along now to my kids.
I love that. And did you always envision yourself in finance, for example, or has your career sort of evolved in opportunistic ways?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because my first, I remember way back when my first interest was I wanted to be an orthodontist. Okay, so
where did that come from?
Nothing.
Did you lose it?
Well, so I told you my father was a doctor. My mother, having stayed home and raised the 3 of us most of the time while he was gone, sort of trained us to not do what he did exactly. But then I was getting my braces, and I'm like, well, let's see, I could be a doctor. This guy doesn't really have to go wake up in the middle of the night and go do surgery or doing this stuff. So that seems like a pretty good life. And I think he only worked Monday through Thursday. So that sounded like a really wonderful opportunity to do that. So
the easy version of doctoring?
Kind of. I didn't want to say that. But anyway, but then I did, as I went through school, I enjoyed math and science. And I realized when I got to college that I could get an accounting degree and have a real career without necessarily having to go get an MBA or something else. And so I'm like, that's a great position to start in. And that's how I got started.
Love it. And were there lessons from those early years, whether it was family or school or sports, that still sort of influence how you lead today?
Yeah, again, I was always driven, again, don't let the ball bounce twice. So I'm always sort of trying to go for it and try to make sure I'm putting every effort I could into it. And again, my father was successful at what he did, and I saw him put in really hard work at what he did to make his profession be better. At the same time, he had to care for patients. So I saw him in a light of working with people and certainly people that always were in not the best health condition, and just how he handled that, and bedside manners. And so some of all that stuff I try to incorporate what I do. I try to have good bedside manners, and although it's a little different when you're treating employees versus patients, but nonetheless, that's some of what I really took away from watching my parents do their thing.
I think there's a lot of caretaking in leadership, and getting the best out of folks that report to us. There's that trust, right?
And even working with people that don't report to us, right? Just everybody in the business. I'm getting later in my career, so giving back and trying to mentor and advise, and just really using all those things that I've learned to give back.
Like it. And when you think about some of the challenges that you had early on in your career and how they've maybe shaped how you've evolved specifically as a CFO, what were some of the challenges that you had to undergo that have given you some chops or some stripes on your shoulder?
Yeah. A couple of them were look, when I got my first FP&A role at GE, it was intense, and I just hadn't seen that. And you're at the heart of everything, and all of the business sort of flows through you. And then obviously I was at the GE healthcare unit, so then it had to flow up to GE corporate, and they were depending on us. And so that was pretty intense, and learned how to work some long hours, and just that sort of intensity of closing a public company quarter. The real thing for me, though, is my first sort of divisional CFO opportunity at GE. I went out to a division they had bought in Salt Lake City. It's the first time I had literally moved or lived outside of Wisconsin in my career. And as I was interviewing, they were telling me about the FDA had come in, and as they always do, and just check, audit every few years. And there was a few things, but nothing to worry about. And so I get out there, and I actually moved out there before my family did. My family came later. And in the first few months, the FDA came back, as they would do, to follow up. And not only were the things that were wrong previously still wrong, there was new things they found. And so they went into what they call a consent decree, and they shut down the business. So here I am in my first CFO role, very excited to run and try to grow this business, and the business shuts down. The only thing they couldn't manufacture, they couldn't sell, they could only service. So here we are, taking everybody in the business to go on this quality journey of getting things right. And it's a great learning, because when you're working in a regulated industry, it has to be right. And if you think about healthcare, I mean, if I was going to be in some hospital, I'd want to make sure everything is working perfectly, or airline or whatever. So we had to redeploy the resources, go through that. I had to learn about how to account for a shutdown business, some things that I never anticipated. So it was like $1 million experience that you never necessarily want to walk into, but it was great learning. And I learned, even to this day, the way I think about things is I think about first compliance. It's non-negotiable. It has to happen. Then you prioritize the need to haves, and then you prioritize the want to haves. And so if you prioritize in that way, you'll typically get it right from a capital allocation perspective or investment perspective.
Super interesting. And when you think about transitioning from a company like GE, right, into a public tech company like ServiceNow, there's a mind shift that has to happen, a mindset shift, right? How did you make that transition?
Yeah, it really honestly took me a while. So I went from a company that had 300,000 people, wildly global, and when I joined ServiceNow, they were about 3,000 people, 2,500, 3,000, and they were about 600 million going to $1 billion. It was very different. Like I talk about my journey as, and I didn't realize at this time, but at GE, I felt really important, but you were within this sort of bubble or network of 300,000 people, and you put all your energy into networking and building your network there, because that's how you advanced. And then all of a sudden I stepped out of GE, and I felt like I had no network because it was all inside of GE. Secondly is, while I felt pretty important at GE and it was doing some really interesting things, the reality was I felt like I was more air traffic controlling, because it was such a big company and everything was so well run and well managed. I couldn't screw anything up really, but I couldn't make improvements and change things.
Impact.
Exactly. And so when I got to ServiceNow, the way I liken it to is, now I was on the plane, sort of maybe premium economy, watching how the plane was flown. But I really had that aspiration to move up to, business class and eventually get into the cockpit. I wanted to sort of fly the plane and not sit in the middle or be the air traffic controller.
Interesting. Yeah, that is a huge shift. I can only imagine. I think I met you right when you had
Right
moved
there.
from GE
Yes.
and you had just joined ServiceNow.
It was a lot of learnings, again, because again, after 14 years at one place, and I know you've had some long stints in your career, you're pretty tied into how it runs, the lingo, the process, how you get ahead. And it was a completely different thing. And it was great because I was going from a slower growth, large company that was all about cost control and productivity, which taught me a lot. But at the same time, then I go into hyper growth, adding just a ton of people every year. And obviously it's gone from where I was 10 years ago there to this behemoth of a enterprise software company now.
Yeah. But leaning into that change and the
yeah.
opportunity and welcoming that takes some bravery, right? That takes a lot
and
of courage.
making mistakes, right?
Right.
Because there's a lot of things I didn't know how to do in that environment. I thought everything, I was an air traffic controller, right? I was just watching everything go by, making sure the planes didn't run into each other. Once you get on the plane, I didn't know how to, serve the people on the plane and take care of something at takeoff or land. I didn't know how to do that stuff. So that was all just brand new learnings.
How did you give yourself grace with that when mistakes did happen, right? How did you allow for that? And how did you adjust?
Yeah, it's a good one. I again, because I hadn't been in the environment where mistakes were made a lot, because everything was so sort of closed in terms of the processes, I had to learn through it. And I'm not a one who loves to make mistakes, intentional or unintentional. And so I just had to learn and sort of grit through it. And it was great. I had a wonderful leader, Mike Scarpelli, who was there, who had been in that type of business. In fact, he had come from a smaller business than ServiceNow previously. And so he had seen how that all kind of built up. And I realized that was something that I was missing. Is I had worked at this big GE and learned, again, structure and rigor and process, but not how to deal with sort of that messiness at the startup or early phases. And so I had to make my mistakes and learn through it. And lo and behold, I later went somewhere else and had to make a whole bunch more mistakes.
As we do, but the learning is, that's fantastic. And you've certainly built a reputation as a CFO who knows what they're doing and knows how to scale and has had so much success. So clearly you've done some things right. And one of the reasons, I'm just so partial to the role of CFO, I think that's because I spent so many years in public accounting and professional services. But, I think the CFO role, it's one of the few positions that you really get this sort of complete business view. How do you manage that? And from your chair and your perspective, I guess, and how do you find, the strength in all of those cross-functional relationships? Because you have that purview in the CFO role. Yeah.
So one of the things I was saying that I didn't learn from GE about how to deal with that messiness, the one thing I did learn is they were awesome about, it was the CEO, the HR leader, and the CFO were sort of the triumvirate of terms of how they ran. And so the CFO or finance leader always had a seat at the table. So I got the opportunity to see even there in terms of like more as a COO and learning how to see across the business. So I did learn a little bit there. I didn't have the ability to make the decisions that I do today, but I learned. And so I just jumped in head first. So I had come from ServiceNow where I was leading accounting, procurement, and treasury. And now I go and become a CFO at a much smaller company, and I'm doing accounting and procurement and treasury, but I'm also doing legal. I'm also doing facilities. I'm also doing IT, a little bit of HR. And so these were all new to me, right? But I just had this passion to want to learn and figure it out. And going back to making mistakes, I made a bunch of mistakes along the way, but I just kept trying to figure it out and learn. I was able to join a wonderful finance CFO network in the Bay Area, Founder Circle, and most of the folks in there were private company finance leaders. So I had the ability to sort of have a network to lean on to ask questions about like, how do you do this and how do you do that? And I learned a lot from them. I had a great former CFO who was our board member and audit chair at Couchbase, and he helped me whenever I had things. So I had a great sort of support network system. I told you I had to rebuild that after I left GE, but I finally did that. And so yeah, I just have a passion for like knowing what's going on in the business. My priority is to do what's in the best interest of the business, not what's in the best interest of finance or Greg or anything else. It's really trying to put the lens of like what's the best interest for the business. And when I say the business, it's the employees, it's the shareholders, customers, all those folks.
Mm-hmm. No, I get that. And speaking of Couchbase, the IPO there, you led that, multiple capital raises, obviously, all while growing ARR by 10x, right? Or almost 10x. What were the toughest trade-offs that you faced during that whole journey?
Yeah, I mean, the first one is I effectively got hired, and they really quickly told me that the guy who was the CEO at the time was going to move to the executive chair role, and they're going to bring a new CEO in. So I immediately got a little nervous about what does that mean? Ultimately, they were going through the process, and they're like, "Hey, you get input, but you don't get a vote," which was kind of interesting. But I got fortunate that the guy they picked ended up being a wonderful CEO, became a friend, and we were just great business partners together. So just going through it together was really interesting and fun, and we both again made a bunch of mistakes along the way, but just learning and having sort of the sort of freedom to do that was wonderful. Meaning it was such a small business that we could make little changes and make little decisions and would try. And if it didn't work out, we'd pivot, right? And so it was really just doing that. I don't want to say it was by trial and error. We tried to have some science behind
some
it.
Plan.
But you never do know. So it was just really a great experience to learn that. And I can again tell you about all sorts of mistakes we made. I mean, if he was here, his name's Matt Kane. We could talk about in 2018. We sort of had felt like a near-death experience with the company, and then we rebounded and we were going, and then COVID hit and that impacted us, and then we got it going again and went public. So it was just it was all those. I tell people today, it's like all those experiences. While you're going through them, they may not feel wonderful, and you may just feel like it's going nowhere. But boy, you can really draw on those as you get further into your career.
Right. Yeah, like you say, the wisdom that comes from that, it's a great guidepost for future situations. And now at 1Password, how are you thinking about capital deployment when it comes to balancing growth and profitability and sustainability and all the things? How does that show up?
Yeah, and so this is a whole new thing for me too, right? So I'm still learning, even later in my career, because Couchbase, we never had sort of excess capital around, even though we raised a lot of money. We were growing, and of course, back in those days, it was grow at all costs, and so we were burning a lot of money. And even when I left earlier this year, the company still had never turned a profit. And then I come to 1Password, which started 20 years ago. They ran the company 13 years before they took any funding, so they bootstrapped it. And even to this day, it's cash flow positive, and they've never used a dollar of their primary capital. God bless the PLG motion in security. So it's very different because now we're doing things and we have capital that I wasn't used to having, right? And so I'm having to sort of unlearn some of the things that I learned about being sort of really tight and rigid and frugal, about trying to figure out, are there opportunities to really invest in that we could lean into and forward invest to help drive growth, visibility, awareness for the company that maybe we don't have today, and will it play out, in the next quarter, the next year, next couple of years? So we're sort of doing that, and so the company's gotten into some sports marketing. We announced a nice partnership last week with Smith Entertainment Group. We're doing a lot of activity with partnering with both technology companies, like we just had announced one with BrowserBase. We're doing partnerships with AWS. So just a lot of new opportunities to sort of get into some things that I really didn't have at Couchbase. And also because it's PLG, it's been very much self-serve inbound. It's got a consumer business. Couchbase was all outbound, all enterprise selling, and there was no consumer aspect. So still learning and understanding how to evolve into this business model.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's that tension between risk aversion, but yet how do we vision out? How do we grow? And knowing where and when, right, to invest and to push and pull.
And trying to turn in from, some people might have said I was a CFO No. to hopefully become a CFO Go is what I'm trying to evolve in. But
I love this. There's a T-shirt in there somewhere.
Oh, for sure. But it comes from my GE was always squeezing at Couchbase, and now it's like, okay. And by the way, I just don't want to. We're not spending frivolously.
Understood.
We're just in a position where we have the ability to do that when we see the opportunity.
Selectively and smartly. Absolutely. One of your biggest achievements and very notable ones at Couchbase was shifting to a cloud consumption model. What were the biggest internal resistances or obstacles that you encountered when you tried to do that? And how did you get past
Yeah, it was, well, we know we needed to do it. It was sort of like how, when, and then what does it look like on the other side? Because it's a completely different business model. And again, tons of learnings along the way. I just think back even right now about how we thought the business was going to go when we got to that point versus how it did. But before we were basically selling software. So I'd sell you a piece of software and you go figure it out and do whatever you want with it.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're buying a service from us, right? So we're hosting you. You have access. You're metered now. So we know how much you're using. Before I could have sold you one thing, but it was a piece of software. We didn't know if you were using one thing or two things or 100 things. Now we have very specific. So it just really changed how we thought about the business. And it also brought in the element of when you sell pure software, there's effectively, I don't want to say no cost, but there's no cost. So margins are just off the charts. Well, now we're hosting, we're providing a service. So there's people that have to manage the service. So now it's a different profile. And so shifting into that model and getting like our field teams thinking about like profitability all of a sudden really mattered. It's not that it didn't matter before, but again, software has sort of infinite margins where this didn't. And so just a mindset of how you price deals, how you sell them. It's fascinating. And ironically, I'm having discussions now at 1Password because we're a password manager and we sell what we call seats. But there's a view, and I have this view that with AI coming, it's not going to be just a seat base. There's going to be some consumption element to it. So we're starting to have that discussion about how do we do that. And again, it's awesome that I've had the experience of how to evolve that, not only from a business model, but operationally of how do we think about it. And the fact that it sounds like, oh, well, let's just go do that and you can do it overnight. But the reality is it takes a while to build that and build to it. So that experience is really helping me think through how to do this evolution, at the next place.
Interesting. And when you think about data and analytics, how are you integrating all of that into sort of the financial decision making and the planning that you're focused on?
Yeah. So today at the company, I actually run. Not only do I run accounting and FP&A, but I run our data analytics group. So we just moved to centralization of that about a year ago, and so it was sort of decentralized. And the decision was let's centralize it because we can get more out of it by having a team work together and getting synergies out of that. So look, we're trying to build and make sure that we can support the company, not only today, but in the future around what the infrastructure we have around data, what the output we can produce. Obviously with AI capabilities now, it's changing how that is, but we're making sure that we can solve what each part of the business needs, which is very different. What HR needs for analytics is completely different than what marketing needs for analytics. And so while there's synergies behind the back-end infrastructure, how you deliver that and how you can help people access the information, create the analysis, and even beyond creating the analysis is how do you give them information that they didn't have? It's not just producing like, here's the report and here's some formulas that what is the insight that you're gonna provide to them? And so it's really trying to take that thinking to the next level. And that's really where the new AI capabilities can come in hand, because you can ask it to summarize something very quickly and get to either the insights you would have gotten to or even insights you might not have gotten to.
Yeah. I think we're all swimming in data.
Oh, yeah.
But we really are starving for insights, right?
Yes.
Super thirsty for insights. So that's super interesting. And when you think about the finance teams, kind of must have tech tools, tech stack, platforms, et cetera, like some that you just mentioned, whether it's AI forecasting, all the things. How do you approach which ones to adopt, how you adopt those, what you say yes to, what you say CFO no to?
So for what's interesting is, so the office of the CFO, the tools are starting to really evolve, and they haven't evolved much. So it's sort of like, you had a couple ERPs, there was a couple few FP&A solutions, but you pretty much kind of knew what they were. Especially if you wanted to scale and get to scale. But there's some really interesting new ones emerging today that are sort of disrupting that, where folks like the Oracles and SAPs of the world have had sort of a stronghold on that. There's some really new interesting tools that are AI native and building analytic capabilities in that just didn't exist before. So that's evolving. The things I also think about is what tools might a certain part of the organization use that another might use. So what I'm trying to avoid is like having two ticketing systems.
Totally.
Trying to avoid having two cloud storage systems, like all that stuff. And obviously I work with our CIO and CISO on that, but that's where I think I can come in, where you can see one org's trying to evolve and being like, hey, we want to move from this tool to the next tool, but without having that broader purview and having it centralized, they would have just gone and done that. And another org would have done the same thing. Now we can sort of see across it and bring in like harmony around what tools we use. So we only have one of each. Even though we want best of breed, we don't want to have it duplicated all over the organization. And that is really what you start seeing, which is the SaaS sprawl that happens as you get bigger and bigger.
Absolutely. No, I absolutely heard and experienced that in many ways. And I love that word you used, harmony. I think it's a great way of viewing it. Pivoting a little bit to talk about kind of risk and governance and trust and whatnot, especially as it relates to finance and overall leadership. You know, because you have been a part of scaling and rapidly, how do you balance, and we touched on this a little bit earlier, but maybe you could go a little bit deeper, you know, maintaining those sort of a rigor around controls and compliance and governance, but also really being a yes person to growth and innovation. I mean, how does that show up for you? How do you dig into that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So like, again, I go back to my compliance need to have, nice to have. And so the controls are just the compliance, right? It's non-negotiable. You have to have it to run a high quality organization. And starting my career at E&Y and being a former CPA, I'm super passionate about that. Like it's critical. And I saw areas where it didn't work and the trouble it creates. So I'm super strict about that. But at the same time, I like to push, right, a little bit. And I think you have to learn how to operate in the gray area and not just black and white. And so how can you look at things where, you know, something in the middle might be versus, you know, one side or the other. And we do this all the time, and we have a lot of back and forth internally because I will try to push on the team to find where that gray area is. I don't want to step out of bounds, but at the same time, there's you know, I think there's always nuances of how you can portray something, execute something without having to follow just a strict black and white path. It's not easy. And again, of course, when I'm doing this with like my controller group, they're a little more black and white. And so it's finding that healthy tension. And I'm sure sometimes they're like, hey, I think he's being a little too creative or a little too wild, but you got to find that sort of middle ground. Then again, when I talk to my CEO, he probably thinks I'm being too black and white and he's trying to find a different gray area. So, you know, again, all working within the framework of what's acceptable, but just trying to push and just find that right spot.
Yeah. It's a little woo-woo of a word to use perhaps in this context, but there's a trust is in there somewhere, right? And I wonder how you think about trust, you know, both internally when you're thinking about your engineering crew, your sales crew, you know, the product teams, and externally, whether that's with investors, customers, et cetera. You know, is trust a differentiator for you at all, or how do you see trust?
I think it's critically important, whether it's a work relationship, a personal relationship. And I think all of us know, you know, if people break trust, it's really hard to sort of get that back. So I think trust is a big thing. And interestingly, so I'm new at 1Password, and I'm running their fiscal planning right now. And one of the things I do, which is I have to give the targets to my peers in the different functions to go build their plans for next year and figure out where they want to invest. But I give a single dollar amount. I don't give like, you get this much headcount, you get this much program dollars, you get this much travel.
Right.
I don't do that because I trust that they're better at doing that for their function than I could be. Do I have some oversight and view so that they can't just go completely, you know, I can't have marketing have all people and no programs, or all programs, no people. Like you can't do that, but there's a fine balance. So, but I trust that they're going to go do the best thing. And then I'll have some, just again, high level oversight, but I don't dictate like, this is your headcount target, this is your this target. Like I trust that they have been doing this for a long time and they know better how to allocate that capital than I do.
Yeah. You know, I think it's a great process, right? And when you think about your leadership style and coming into a new culture, how do you, because eventually, you know, rubber meets road, right? There's a CFO Go, CFO No. You know, how do you balance those hard moments, right? Because you are growing, and there is an existing culture, a 20-year one, right, that you're coming into as the new guy. So how does all that look?
Well, one thing after being at the last place for over 8 years is there is definitely a startup tax when you come into a new organization around culture, people, language, how they do business, everything. And you want to be mindful of that because you want to fit in. You ultimately want to be accretive to it, but you want to be able to fit in. So that's the first thing. I think if you ask people, I think people will say I'm tough but fair. So I love to have a good debate. And the way I am is I'll debate you for as long as it takes. I don't have to win. I may try to, but I don't have to win. But I'll walk away and I'll be perfectly fine. Like I don't dwell and hang on that. Like I think that's a really important part. And maybe that goes back to trust. It's like, as long as we're doing it in the spirit of what's in the best interest of the company and doing it, out of a good place, then I think it's all very healthy to do that. And I encourage it. And I often ask people to tell me if they think I'm wrong or doing something. Like I want to hear the feedback and I want to have the debate about it. But I love, again, trying to figure out what's in the best interest of the company, even if it's not what we're doing today. I've come in, I've made some changes right away. There's some things I'm going to have to wait to do because I don't want to, you can't come in and do everything and you can't be like, this is my playbook and this is how I want to run it. You will probably get organ rejection at that point because this is a culture and a place that's been running. But, you can make some small tweaks along the way. And the reality is that's why we hire people, right? We hire people to bring new ideas and new thinking. And so I like to believe that that's why I got hired, because I can help evolve this from the greatness that they built from zero to where they are today and take it to the next level.
Yeah. I think it's great thinking. And there's a book, 5 Dysfunctions of Team, which is a favorite. And it encourages so much of what it sounds like, you exercise, which is that let's all come to the table. It's absolutely okay to have differing opinions and differing perspectives. Again, with the caveat or understanding that everyone's coming from a good place of like company first, right? Or, business first. And assuming that's the case, that kind of dialogue gets you great results, I think, right? When it's encouraged.
It does. And you have to have that amongst particularly the leadership team, right? I mean, the leadership team is all these people that are well under their careers, mostly type A type personalities. They're going for it, hardworking. And you just don't want to have where you have this, bad thing where people can't speak their mind. And then the small talk happens off to the side. And then that's where you just don't have the trust and the kind of relationship. And I've seen, and I give my last CEO a lot of credit. He built that in spades with his leadership team, and it paid dividends. We operated better because of it. He brought in things like Enneagram, if you're familiar with Enneagram, which I'm a big fan of.
What's your number?
Well, okay, here we go.
I'm a 3. Do you remember?
That's not a surprise. I'm a 1.
Oh, okay. I can see you as a 1.
Okay. And most CFOs or accounting people are 1s because it tended to be black and white. However, I've taken the test, if you will, 3 times, and every time my highest score is an 8. And so we had this debate a little bit about it, not to deviate, but my former CEO who brought this in, he decided there's a nature versus nurture thing. So he thinks naturally I'm a 1, but I've been nurtured, particularly through the GE environment, to be more like an 8.
Yeah.
So,
you know what? I've done the Myers-Briggs, and when I did it when I was in my early 20s, I was one thing. And then after surrounding myself with highly analytical, very structured, process-oriented people for the last several decades, I've switched out a couple letters, and it's adaptive,
maybe that's
right?
your nurture.
Yeah, nurture.
But going back to the Enneagram, one of the things that we brought in is about this clearing process, right? And so when there's people, whether it's 2 executives or could be partners or whatever, you have to find a way to clear the issues, right? Because if they fester, that's where the bad stuff happens. And so that's why I'm of the big opinion of just hit it straight on and like, hey, Nicole, you got a problem with me, or you got something that you want to talk about, or otherwise the relationship isn't strong. And I have this thing, we spend more waking hours at work than we do at home, if you will, even if you work out of home, but you get my point.
Yeah.
And yet in our personal home life, we curate what we do and who we spend the time with. Why would you not want to bring that same lens to the
Philosophy
workplace
to work,
and be in a place where you enjoy coming to work and you enjoy the people you work with and you can have constructive conversation.
Definitely. Which kind of leads into my next question, which is, you've clearly come in to organizations and built out a finance team and accounting teams. And when you think about that and scaling, what are some of the ways that you've approached that for the CFOs that might be listening that are attempting to do the same or are also looking to build and scale a team? What are some success metrics for doing that?
Yeah, well, a couple things is typically the CFO has the accounting and the FP&A team. Those are most traditional. They could have a bunch of other things. So to have a wonderful controller, chief accounting officer, and a wonderful FP&A leader, those are like non-negotiables. Like if you don't have those two things, and if you're even on the fence, it's very difficult just because you'll never get accomplished what you want to get to. And then beyond that, and this is broader than just the CFO org, but the way I've learned is you have to frame it in this order: strategy, then structure, and then people. Often we try to figure out the opposite. We look at either the people or the structure we have today and try to make decisions from that. Oh, this person's good, we should do this with them, or they're not good. I always go in and I do this for myself and I do this for my leaders. What is your strategy? Lay it out, write it down. It could just be 3 to 5 bullets. Build the org structure that is best suited to execute on that strategy. Boxes, no names, just the boxes. Then we can take the pool of people we have today and see if they fit in those boxes. A lot of them will, some of them won't. And that to me is how you sort of build the organization. And yes, it's easy to do that when you first walk into an organization because it's all fresh. But you got it. Like when you go through the annual review cycle, you really should challenge yourself about relooking at that and make sure it's the right setup. So that's how I think about it specifically for being in the CFO seat, but more broader when I work with my team or other teams, I do the strategy, structure, people, and it really gets to it real quick because they'll be like, well, I don't know what to do with this person. And well, guess what? They don't fit in a box.
Yeah.
So I think we know what to do with the person now.
Strategy, structure, people. I love that. Very good. And as we kind of move on to our last kind of clump of questions here, I'd love to get some of your insight and advice, especially for the folks that are listening that are either aspiring to the C-suite or aspiring, into a board role somehow. Like, for example, your mentors that you've had along the way. Can you call a few of those out? And how did you come by them? And how did that all evolve in terms of the impact on your ultimate career growth?
First of all, mentorship is undervalued today. I don't know why I don't see enough people with mentors that they can really lean on. And I've had that benefit. So the first one I would call out is Kelly Kramer. Kelly was running FP&A when I was at GE Healthcare, and she went on to a couple other things at GE, but ultimately she was the CFO of Cisco. And then she sits on the boards of companies like Coinbase, Snowflake, Figma. So she's had a nice board career as well. But again, she just had this way of attacking hard problems, just getting after things, never, again, clearing, always addressing things head on. Interesting, like even when we did, like, I remember even when we did reviews and we did like 360s and they were all confidential, there was nowhere to write your name in. She would always put her name after each comment because she wanted you to know that it was coming from her so that if you wanted to come back to her and follow up, you could, versus throwing in these like little things, both good and bad, and not knowing sort of where it came from. So she just taught me a lot about that and just, again, how to be a great finance leader. Started working for her 20 plus years ago, still a mentor and one of my really good friends that we stay in contact with. And then the second one was Matt Kane, who was the CEO of Couchbase, the guy who came in right after I started. And we just formed a wonderful partnership, and he was a great leader. He brought in things like the Enneagram, strategy, structure, people. Like that was a big thing of his. A lot of great sayings that I use today, like, we need to deal with the way the world it is, not the way the world it is, not the way we want it to be, things of that nature. So just a lot of learnings and sort of just higher level sort of thinking about being a leader. So, and again, still a good friend, still a mentor, even though we're not working together anymore today. But those are great, and I'll pull on them for the rest of my career, no matter what I'm doing. And as you've seen, some of these really strong mentorships end up turning into friendships. And so for anybody out there, particularly early or mid-career, if you don't have somebody who's a mentor, I would definitely find it. And you're going to have to seek it out because it's going to have to be somebody you think that can add value to you, that's going to be available to you. But it's, again, like I said, it's highly undervalued today.
And how do you mentor others at this point in your career? Do you make it a habit to do that? I'm assuming you do. And what advice do you give them about networking and all the things that they should be doing to better themselves?
Yeah, so I'm at sort of closer to the end of my career than the beginning, and
What?
shocking. I have entered my give back phase. So I have taken a lot from others, the Kellys, the Matts, my university, a lot of people I've worked with. And so I am in this give back phase where I want to help. I advise a couple companies, founders, early stage people. I have people that I worked with in the past that continue to call me to this day and know they can always call me. I'm hoping I'm doing that with the people I work with on a day-to-day basis today, but I am wide open. I just actually reconnected with my University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I told the dean of the business school there yesterday, I said, I'm open. Like, I'm in my give back phase. If there's things I can do, if I can help interview students and get them ready, if they want to shadow, which I do sometimes, like any of that, like I think it's awesome. And I get a lot of enjoyment out of it. And my whole hope is that in the next 10 or 20 years, I can look back and watch some of these people and they'll be sitting with the next Nicole Ward here doing the, to the top.
And at the top, yes.
To the top podcast because they've been successful in their careers. And so that's what I love doing.
It. That's great. And, I would love if you were willing to share, because I'm sure some of your mentors have asked you, what's a decision or, a decision that you made that ultimately was a faceplant, something that was really a fail for you, but that ended up becoming a great learning. And I've shared this many times on this show, which is one of my favorite phrases my great grandmother used to say was, poop makes great fertilizer. And so I wonder if you would share a little bit of what made good fertilizer for you.
Yeah. So I told you about the one at GE where we went under consent decree. I wasn't really part of that decision, but it was just the $1 million experience. The other one was at my time at Couchbase. There was a couple of things and they're sort of intertwined. We had, but this goes back to like 2017. We've been doing really well, beating our plan. We went to the board. We asked to spend more because we were ahead of our top line growth. And in the second half of the year, things stalled out. Now, this is like, I hadn't even been there for a year. The CEO had been there for less than a year, but things started stalling out. So sales wasn't sort of doing the right thing. We found out marketing took their foot off the gas on pipe generation. And we were a longer cycle business, and it really caught us in the first half of 2018, and to the point where we went flat. And this was sort of one of these near-death experiences where Matt and I would talk about, like, we're staring over the abyss, like we're looking into the abyss, we're going to run out of money. We just ran the company into the ground. And so we had to go dig ourselves out from that. And then, we said, well, we need to do some fundraising. And so at that point, I had never done any fundraising. And so I was calling all these venture firms, going out, meeting with them, trying to get them excited. And our main investor at Couchbase kind of saw this, and the feedback wasn't great. And basically told me I screwed it all up the way I approached it. And I didn't get any guidance of how to do it. I kind of just was asking people and learning. And so I felt like I had, between staring over the abyss and not being able to raise capital, I thought, well, I've ruined this opportunity. And so again, fortunately, we were able to turn it around. And those are those $1 million experiences where you're staring over the abyss. And then lo and behold, you look back up and blue skies and we're back.
You make it through.
Yeah.
I love it. Very good. Very
so
helpful.
never
give up.
As dark as it seems, don't despair. There's always a way to work your way out of it.
I love it. All right. And when you think about a discipline that you personally maintain, something that really helps you perform at your best, whether that's cognitively or under high pressure situations, is there a best practice that you have, something that you do that keeps you on your A game?
Well, I think you would develop, and you should develop, a routine. And so my routine, and again, it came probably like I'm 54 now. Probably came when I was closer to like 40, and I had all my kids, and they were sort of, out of the baby phase or whatever. I did pick up exercising finally again in my life. And so now I'm pretty regular. I'm a Peloton person. I get up, 6 a.m. in the morning and get on almost every morning of the week, not Sundays typically. So I'm big on that, and I'm big on sleep.
Yay.
Yeah, exactly. And so I've read enough of the books, and I try to be like a 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. person when I can. But I think sleep and the exercise, I like to think I watch my diet, but I stray. And as you read in my bio, I do like my wine. So, everyone has their vices, but it's really around nowadays it's around the sleep and the exercise. And it's amazing. I used to exercise after work. And I was like, oh, I just can't get up. I can't do it. And then I don't know, maybe I just got older, but I started doing it before work. I'm like, I could never do it after work because before work, it's not going to disrupt anything. There's nothing to disrupt it.
Yep.
And you can have your day planned out all you want. And like, I'm good. I'll be ready to go at 5 to the gym. And that thing comes up and it's over.
And it's a great way to start your day.
It is. It
You
is.
just
I feel
automatically
wonderful.
accomplished.
I feel wonderful.
Automatically.
And it's amazing the days you don't and you couldn't do it or you prolonged it. It's like just grinding at me. I got to get it in. I got to figure it out and just get it done.
Get it done. I love it.
Something you would know a little bit about.
Yes. I'm personal passion of mine as well.
I know.
So tell me, what is, other than financial metrics, what is success to you? Are you successful?
I look at success as, there's personal and there's work. So the work thing to me, I tell everybody is you have to love what you do. And if you don't, go figure out something else because you need to love it. You have to at a minimum, like who you do it with, preferably love who you do it with. And that's the fitting in culture. You have to feel valued and you have to be fairly compensated. And when you get all those things, that's success. Like you should be happy. Now, nobody thinks their compensation's enough. I get it, but is it fair? That's for you to debate, but that's work. And then I look at home as like, again, spending time with my wife and my family and raising my kids and friends and, and just generally trying to be happy in life. My father, who's now retired, has a saying, he's like, I don't have time not to be happy. And I've adopted that. And so I think that's a good one of measuring of success is like, are you happy with work? Are you happy with what you do in your personal life? If you are, you should feel successful. If you're not, probably should change something.
I love that. I don't have time not to be happy. That is a great takeaway.
Thank you, Lyle Henry.
I love it. Your dad knows what's up. I like it.
So you do get wiser as you get older.
Absolutely.
Not just all the other things.
I love it. And so anything that I should have asked you about that I haven't, or any last words of wisdom or guidance that you have for the folks that are listening? Or
I have some of these sayings, right? And the one I use the most is absent information, the human will assume the worst. Mm-hmm. And so if you just think about that, communication is like paramount. So whether, again, it's personal, work, doesn't matter, but the more you can communicate and share how you're thinking, how you're feeling, I think that's really important. And the same goes to others, right? So if you're not sharing with others what's going on, absent information, the human will assume the worst. So give them the information, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, doesn't matter, but make sure people know what's happening and then they'll feel okay.
Communication and transparency, for sure.
Yeah.
I think that's obviously what has made you or helped you or empowered you to be as successful as you have been. So very good guidance and good words for folks to use and live by. I'm just so grateful that you got to come and we got to have this conversation, especially after knowing each other for so many years. And, I've just gotten to see your just incredible work that you've done at several companies now. And it's just impressive. And I'm really excited for what's on the horizon at 1Password.
Yeah, I'm not done. Don't write me off yet. But anyway,
you were the one that said you were closer to retirement.
Well, retirement from operating. I have other aspirations after that. But anyway.
Okay. Well, do we need to hear what those are?
Oh, well, I would love to, again, I'm in my give back phase. So I'd love to continue to advise companies, board roles, things like that, where I can help others and tap into my, my experiences, because I think it's really important. So But I want to thank you too for having me. It's been a wonderful being here. I appreciate your friendship and all the connectivity we've had over the years. And this is actually, even though I've done several podcasts, this is my first in-studio podcast.
Honored.
Which is awesome.
Love it.
And so thank you so much for having me. And I appreciate Aon for supporting, what you do to be able to have this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nicole.